The bustling airport was alive with the usual chaos. People rushing to catch flights, families reunited with tearful hugs, and announcements echoing across the terminals. Amid all this, one man stood out. He wasn't running to a gate or wheeling a suitcase behind him. Instead, he sat quietly on a bench, his wrinkled hands folded in his lap, and his gaze fixed on the arrival screen. Day after day, for 3 days, he remained there. Same spot, same hopeful expression. At first, security thought he was just another lost traveler or someone waiting for a delayed flight. But as the hours turned into days, concern began to grow. Who was he waiting for? Why hadn't he left? Was he in trouble? Something about his unwavering patience and the quiet sadness in his eyes caught their attention. On the third day, a security officer decided to approach him, but what they uncovered sent chills down their spine. The man's story was unlike anything they'd ever heard, and the urgency to act became clear. Backup was called immediately, and what happened next left everyone in the airport stunned. What was the truth behind this mysterious, elderly man's wait? Stay tuned to uncover the unbelievable story. The security officer knelt beside the elderly man, speaking softly so as not to startle him. "Sir, are you all right? Do you need help?" The man looked up slowly, his eyes clouded with exhaustion, but carrying a deep determination. He nodded, but his response was cryptic. "I'm waiting for someone. They'll be here soon. I have to stay." The officer pressed gently, trying to piece together the situation. Did he miss a connection? Was someone supposed to meet him? The man's words hinted at something deeper, but he avoided giving too much away. "I promised I'd be here," he said firmly, as if it were a matter of life and death. As they spoke, a crowd began to notice the interaction. Whispers spread across the terminal, and a few travelers stopped to watch. Some felt pity, while others speculated wildly about who or what he might be waiting for. Security reviewed the footage from the past few days. The man hadn't approached anyone, eaten much, or even slept properly. Yet he remained rooted to that bench, as though moving would break some invisible thread of hope. The officer's radio crackled to life. "We found something," a voice said. "You're going to want to see this." The officer excused himself and hurried to the security office, leaving the man under the watchful eye of a colleague. On the screen, the surveillance footage played in silent loops. The elderly man could be seen arriving at the airport 3 days earlier, carrying a small, battered suitcase and a photograph tucked in his jacket pocket. He walked directly to the bench where he now sat, glancing around as though searching for someone. Since then, he hadn't ventured far, just brief trips to the restroom or a nearby water fountain. But what caught everyone's attention wasn't just his strange persistence. It was the photograph. Every so often, he would pull it out, smoothing its edges with trembling fingers before tucking it away again. Zooming in on the image, the officers saw a younger version of the man, smiling beside a woman and a little girl. The child's face was smudged, likely from years of handling the photo, but her bright eyes still shone through. Is he waiting for them? Someone wondered aloud. The woman or the child? But why here and why now? Meanwhile, back in the terminal, a curious traveler approached the man. "Are you waiting for family?" they asked gently. His answer, though simple, sent a chill through them. "I made a promise. I just need to keep it." The airport buzzed with its usual activity, but for the staff watching the unfolding mystery, everything else seemed to fade into the background. The elderly man remained seated, his gaze flicking between the arrival screen and the photograph he kept so close. By now, the officers had discovered more clues from the footage. He had flown in from a small, remote town, his ticket purchased as a one-way journey. No return flight, no checked luggage, just him and his quiet resolve. But why this airport? Why this spot? The photograph hinted at a family, yet there was no record of anyone meeting him or waiting on the other side. As hours ticked by, his frail body began to show signs of strain. His hands trembled more, his eyes growing heavier with each passing moment. Yet whenever someone suggested he rest or leave, he would shake his head. "I can't go," he'd say softly. "I have to stay." Then something unexpected happened. A woman walking briskly through the terminal suddenly stopped in her tracks. She glanced toward the elderly man, her face pale. Slowly, she approached, her expression shifting from shock to something much deeper. Security watched with bated breath as she said, "It's you. After all these years, you came." The elderly man's head turned slowly at the sound of her voice. For a moment, his weary eyes seemed to brighten as he took in the sight of the woman standing before him. Her face was older now, lines of time etched into her features, but there was no mistaking her. She was the woman in the photograph, the one he had carried with him through decades of memories. "You remember me?" he asked, his voice trembling as if he feared the answer. She nodded, her eyes welling with tears. "I never thought I'd see you again," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the terminal. But just as the moment seemed to offer answers, it took a darker turn. A man in a suit approached, his expression stern. "Ma'am," he said firmly, his eyes darting between her and the elderly man. "We need to leave. Now." The woman hesitated, torn between the man in front of her and the urgency in her companion's tone. "Please," the elderly man pleaded, his frail hands reaching toward her. "I need to explain. I waited all this time. You deserve to know the truth." Security exchanged concerned glances. Who was this man in the suit, and why did his presence feel like a warning? The tension thickened as the woman stepped closer to the elderly man, defying the other's command. "I'm not leaving until I hear everything," she said firmly. The woman knelt beside the elderly man, her voice trembling. "Tell me everything," she said, ignoring the man in the suit who hovered just steps away, visibly agitated. The elderly man clutched the photograph in his hands, his voice thick with emotion as he began to speak. "Years ago, I made a promise," he said, "to your mother, to you. I told her that no matter what happened, I would find a way to be here for you. But things didn't go as planned." He hesitated, his gaze dropping to the photograph. "I was taken away. It wasn't my choice, but I couldn't come back. Not until now." The woman's eyes widened. "Taken away? What do you mean?" Before he could answer, the man in the suit stepped forward. "That's enough," he said sharply. "We need to leave. You know what's at stake." "No," the woman shot back, her voice rising. "I need to know the truth." The elderly man took a deep breath, his frailty replaced by a sudden clarity. "Your mother was protecting you," he said. "From them." He gestured subtly toward the man in the suit. "She knew if they found out who I was, it would put you in danger. That's why she told you I was gone." The woman froze as the truth hit her. The man in the suit, now visibly tense, pulled out a badge. "This isn't what you think," he said, but his words felt hollow. "He's not safe here." The twist came as the elderly man reached into his coat, pulling out a small, sealed envelope. "This," he said, handing it to her, "is what your mother died protecting. It's the reason I couldn't be here sooner." As the woman opened the envelope, her hands shaking, the contents inside revealed more than just family secrets. It was evidence. Evidence that tied the suited man and others like him to something far bigger and far darker than anyone had imagined. Security moved in, alarms echoing through the terminal. The elderly man leaned back, his mission finally complete. Now, he said softly, you'll understand why I had to wait. The terminal was chaos as security detained the man in the suit. His protests were drowned out by the unfolding drama. The woman clutched the envelope tightly, her eyes scanning the documents inside. They were proof, evidence of corruption, betrayal, and the sacrifices her family had made to protect the truth. Her mother's warnings, her father's absence, all of it suddenly made sense. The elderly man sat back on the bench, his frail body finally at ease. He had kept his promise, even if it had taken decades. I'm sorry I couldn't be there for you sooner, he said, his voice trembling but sincere. But I never stopped thinking of you, not for a single day. Tears streamed down the woman's face as she reached for his hand. You did what you had to do, she said. And you're here now. That's all that matters. As officers escorted the man in the suit away, the woman turned to her father. Let's go home, she said, smiling through her tears. For the first time in years, he felt the weight lift from his heart. Together, they left the airport, walking into a future where the truth had finally come to light and long-lost bonds were finally restored.